Alright, welcome in Dharma Boots. So today I thought I'd go on a slightly different thing. First off, Facebook is allowing us to create polls now. So I put up a poll asking if you guys would like to see more narrative kinds of services, especially with Halloween coming up. That's probably going to be that's a strong possibility. Or if you'd like to see me do a whole bunch of really deep dives into a specific thing, a specific teaching from the Buddha. So that's a thing. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about hope and fear, because I think there's value in talking about it. All right, and to do that, we're going to be reading from Venerable Pema Chodron and her work. I use this work because I think it elucidates the Buddha's teaching very well, and I think there's a lot to be said about what she's talking about, which in turn is what the Buddha is talking about. And so I think that's kind of what we're going to do for today. For services down the line, do please let me know which of those you would like to see. I will hopefully get those results and be able to put something together for, if not tomorrow, then next week for sure. And moving forward, kind of think of it as a moving forward, kind of like in the future, this is what we're going to move. We're going to kind of like do a little bit more of these and a little bit less of these when possible. So, all right, that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and get to it. Yeah. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhutam saranam gacchami, dhammam saranam gacchami, sangham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi bhutam saranam gacchami, dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi bhutam saranam gacchami, tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata Vramani Skaparam Samadhyami. Adinadana Brahmaniska Param Samadhyami Kamesu Vishashara Brahmaniska Param Samadhyami Savana Brahmaniska Param Samadhyami Surameraya Manja Pamanattana Viramaniska Param Samadhyami. And today we'll just do a quick 5-minute meditation. I think that's appropriate. So, for those who want to do more meditation, either after the live portion is finished, if you're watching live, do feel free to wait until after the live portion is finished and add an additional meditation period in there. For those who are watching after it's live, as soon as we're done with the first 5 minutes, feel free to pause and meditate for as long as you see fit, and then come back. Okay? So, let's get to it. Okay, so again, we're reading from Pema Chodron and talking a little bit about the pairs, the 8 worldly dharmas that are in pairs of 4, right? So 4 pairs, 2 pairs each that are kind of like more or less opposites. And these are in terms of how, things that we experience that cause suffering, or that cause unsatisfactoriness, that cause us to not get what we want and get what we don't want, and really to not know the difference between the two. So ultimately the 8, right, the 8 worldly dharmas are really kind of talking about the 3 poisons, and we're gonna kind of go into that. So let's see what she has to say about it, and then we'll kind of riff on that a little bit. So for those who are wondering, this is a very good kind of like sort of like distilled compilation of her stuff. I would strongly recommend getting it because it has a lot of really practical good stuff for you guys to use in your own learning, in your own education, right, in your own practice. So this is number 28, which is on page 30, Hope and Fear. One of the classic Buddhist teachings on hope and fear concerns what are known as the 8 worldly dharmas. These are 4 pairs of opposites, 4 things that we like and become attached to, and 4 things that we don't like and try to avoid. This is essentially greed, aversion, right? The things that what we want to have but we don't, and the things that we don't want to have but we do, right? We want to get rid of those. That's the pairs, or that's the 8 worldly dharmas, and how they connect to connect back to the 3 poisons, right? So 4 things we like and become attached to, and 4 things that we don't like and try to avoid. The basic message is that when we are caught up in the 8 worldly dharmas, we suffer. First, we like pleasure, we are attached to it. Conversely, we don't like pain, clearly. Second, we like and are attached to praise. We try to avoid criticism and blame. Third, we like and are attached to fame. We dislike and try to avoid disgrace. Finally, we are attached to gain, to getting what we want. We don't like losing what we have. This is also, these are also, we see this a little bit when I've talked about status in the past, and kind of like the idea behind rank, and some of the ideas behind why the Buddha was so insistent that status, because these are all essentially parts, components of status. And when we have that status, when we have that kind of sense that these things will either make us better, or the things that we don't want, right? The 4 that are the 8 worldly dharmas that we want to avoid, they will make us worse, right? They will take something from us, right? So 4 are things that we think are going to help make us better, right? That are going to improve our status, and the other 4 are things that are going to kind of like remove some of that status. And so these are the 8 that we're looking at. And yeah, we can look at it in terms of status. We can also look at it in terms of the poisons that hold us back, right? Things that prevent us from getting to the goal, right? All right, so according to this very simple teaching, becoming immersed in these 4 pairs of opposites, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disgrace, gain and loss, is what keeps us stuck in the path of samsara. We might feel that somehow we should try to eradicate these feelings of pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disgrace. But a more practical approach is to get to know them intimately, to see how they hook us, to see how they color our perception of reality, and how they really aren't all that solid. Then the 8 worldly dharmas become the means for growing wiser, as well as kinder and more content. And here, I can tie this back to shadow work just a tiny little bit. So in the same way as those elements of shadow, right? That the things that the parts of our subconscious, the parts of our psychological makeup that we don't want anybody to see, that we don't want to see ourselves, that we want to pretend like isn't there, right? The stuff that's stuck in the shadow. Those things, if we look at them, if we observe them, if we try to figure out how they're operating, what they're doing, and how they're impacting us, when we do that, then we are one, bringing them into our conscious awareness so we can work on them, right? We don't have to work on them in a kind of very aggressive way. We can work on them in a very gentle way, right? And that's, I think, what she's kind of getting at here is we see these things, we see these parts, these 8 worldly dharmas, and we can understand how they are impacting us when we are aware of them. We have to become aware of them so that we can see that impact, and when we see that impact, then we can do something about it, right? Which ultimately is the root of practice, right? What we're trying to do, right? When we see these things and we know that they're there and we do something about it, when we're practicing, that's what we're trying to do with ourselves. That's what the Buddhist faith is all about. That's what we seek to do, right? We come in, we see what we need to, we become aware of things that are there, and we start to put into practice these particular tools, these particular teachings that will help us to, find the ones that are not useful and set those, eventually set those aside, right? Let them go, and find the ones that are useful and keep following them until, as long as they continue to be useful. This is a teaching that says we don't have to be stuck in the fear, right? We don't have to be stuck in the shadow. We don't have to let the shadow kind of loom in the background, dictating, some of our conscious choices, because that might, if I do this, right, it might show the world that I'm not really as good as I think I am, right? In the same way with these 8 worldly dharmas, if we are willing to put into practice and look at them with compassion, right, look at ourselves internally with compassion and say, yeah, I got some areas to work on. I'm not going to judge myself for it. I'm going to work on them, right? Instead of saying, we could take the approach of saying, no, these are bad, these are terrible, these are awful, I'm going to get rid of them, I'm going to completely destroy them. Well, they serve a purpose too. And it's not in getting rid of them that we defeat them. It's not in getting rid of them that they stop impacting us. It's in integrating them. It's in bringing them into awareness and saying, what does this do? How does this operate? How does this help me or not help me? How is this useful or not useful? How is this skillful or not skillful? How is this blameless or blameworthy, right? We look at all of these, every single piece of those, we look at these 8 things, these 8 worldly dharmas, and we ask ourselves, is this thing useful? Is it actually benefiting myself, others, or both? Or is it harming myself, others, or both? And that's how we bring it in. We say, okay, well, this thing is, what is it teaching me? What is it trying to show me? What am I trying to do with this thing? And when we do that, we are able to let go of a lot of the fear that that all of these 8 worldly dharmas that are looming in the background there. We are the things that we can't see, we're terrified of as a human species. Those things that we cannot see, like the dark, right? When we're in the dark, when it's a dark night out and we hear a bump in the night, we're terrified of that, right? Because we don't know what it is. When we can see it though, when we turn on the light and when we can see it, we can look at it and say, okay, this is this thing and it's doing this thing and it made me afraid because of this. Then we can take that and say, okay, well, how do I put that into practice? How do I make myself how do I work on that so that I am not afraid of this thing, which is actually not, it's there and it serves a purpose, and we don't have to be afraid of it, right? When we allow ourselves to deeply contemplate, to deeply engage with these, with these things, especially with the 8 worldly dharmas, we are able to figure out how they impact us, whether that's fear or otherwise, and we can then adapt our own presence and our own reality. We can adapt how we are we can't adapt reality. We can adapt how we are responding to reality, right? The things that we do matter. So let's take a look at these, right? Pleasure and pain. How, obviously, every human being wants, even on a subconscious level, and this is a thing that we have to be aware of, wants things that are pleasurable, right? We want pleasurable experiences. We want, there's a saying, there's a phrase that I will sometimes use, which it makes sense in this context to ask ourselves this question: do you like tasty things? There's not a human being alive who will sit there and say, I hate tasty things. The problem there is, what is a tasty thing? Is it tasty things for you, or is it tasty things for somebody else? The things that you find tasty, that you particularly like, those foods that you find particularly pleasant to eat, those are tasty things. You like them. On almost a subconscious, well, probably on a subconscious and usually a conscious level, you can look at that and say, I like this kind of food. This is tasty. I'm going to eat it and I'm going to like it, right? Because it is what we've determined as tasty, right? This is a pleasant thing that we want more of. The problem is not so much the tasty thing itself. The problem is the attachment to that tasty thing, to wanting more of it, wanting more of it, wanting more of it, right? Conversely, very few people, don't get me wrong, there are some out there who have some pretty weird kinks. They can do their own thing on their own time. I'm not gonna condone or support or any of that, but that's their choice and that's their thing, right? Very few people really like pain. Very few people really like things that hurt. Very few people like to be punched in the face. Sometimes it happens, right? But nobody really likes it. We're going to go with that nobody, and factoring in that, yes, I realize that nobody is not exactly the accurate word there. People don't like pain, right? People like things that are pleasant. People like tasty food. People don't like being punched in the face. This is simple. Ask anybody, and the vast majority of people are going to look at me and say, yeah, I like eating tasty food, and no, I don't like getting punched in the face, right? For obvious reasons. So that pain that's kind of sitting in the back there, we try to avoid it, we try to escape it, we try to get rid of it, we try to not let that be a thing in our lives. And every single time we do, we are allowing that fear to take root, to kind of install itself in our lives. We don't have to do that. We don't have to, we can look at the pain and say, okay, what is this pain teaching me? If your leg is broken, right? Or if you, we'll go a much easier example. If you step on a Lego, right? Everybody knows that pain, right? Everybody has that kind of experience of maybe you stepped on a slightly more angular rock or something, right? Everybody knows that feeling of, oh, yeah, that I definitely don't want to be there, right? And that's what the pain is trying to teach you. This is not a situation that you want to be in. You want to go someplace else, do something else. So you are not in that pain. That pain is there to teach you that some things are not where you need to be. Some things are not what you need to be. right? That's what that pain is there to teach you. Changing it from this fearful thing in the background, this fearful kind of like nebulous pain, right, into, oh, this is something that's there to teach me something. What is it there to teach me? What is it there to show me? What do I need to avoid? What do I need to not do so that I don't have this pain? When we look at it that way, instead of saying, oh, pain is terrifying, right? Do that for yourself and see what kind of shift happens, right? Test, like as the Buddha himself said, test this stuff, right? If you can change that understanding and that relationship to, to something that is typically unpleasant, right? Pleasant, unpleasant, or in this case, pleasure and pain, right? If you can make that shift away from pain as like, from pleasure as being, oh, this is something I have to have more of, right? It's nice when it's there, but it doesn't have to be there, right? And pain, it's there to teach you a lesson, but it's not something that we have to be afraid of. And that's kind of where we're going with these pairs, right? With the 8 worldly dharmas. We don't have to allow ourselves to grasp at those things that we want, and we also don't have to be terrified and try to avoid all of this stuff that we don't like, right? So pleasure and pain, praise and blame. Who here? Okay, not even getting into like the 5 love languages. Who here hears a nice little bit of praise and thinks, oh, that was sucky? Pretty much nobody, right? Very few people. Same thing with blame, right? Nobody, if somebody's going to sit there and be like, you're a sorry jerk because you're bald, right? I'm just going off my own example here, right? You look at that and you like, nobody's going to sit there like, nobody's going to say that they like to be blamed, right? Why are you blaming me because I'm bald, right? Like, why? Like, nobody's interested in that. Nobody's invested in that. In the same way, nobody's going to sit there and be like, oh, praise kind of sucks, right? Praise is useful as long as we don't get attached to it. And yes, I'm fully well aware that there are very specific attachment styles where that praise is going to do, like praise triggers dopamine in the brain. That praise triggers that dopamine that says, yes, this is a good thing, this is a positive thing, I want more of this. We have to be aware of that. We have to watch that. We have to do what we can to not put ourselves in a spot where that is something that we are grasping at, that we are attached to, right? Praise in the right way, understood as a statement observing a fact about an action that was done well, right? Understood as that is incredibly useful. Praise as, oh, everybody's got to say I'm great. I have to make sure everybody says I'm great. That's not useful. That's not skillful. That's not wholesome. That's not good. That is, in fact, very much an addiction, and it is an addiction that we should be pitying people who are stuck in that mindset, right? Same thing with blame, right? Blame, when understood right, is saying, this is a thing that was done that was not done very well. Well, what does that tell us? What does that teach us? What does that show us? It tells us, it shows us, it teaches us that no, we're not perfect. Yes, we make mistakes. And yes, we can come back from making mistakes. Yes, we can grow and develop and change, right? We can improve ourselves, always. Now, if we let that blame be something that we're just terrified of in the background, it's looming over us, blame is going to come down, right? It's going to have a negative impact. But blame as understanding, okay, I wasn't perfect, I'm human, right? Just like everybody else is. And as I'm human, I get to learn how to do better. I get to learn how to improve myself day by day by day by day. Every single day we have the chance to improve. We have the chance to do better. We have the chance to grow and to develop and to practice. Sometimes we have to practice being a human so that we can maybe, maybe one day get it right. And that's what we have to sit there and worry about. Well, that's what we have to sit there and think about with that, right? Take legitimate blame as a source of saying, we're going to do better, right? Not as a source of, this is a thing that's going to haunt us. Because yes, I understand that there are some, not even getting into the abnormal psych side of it, but there are some very clear things that might put us in that spot, right? There are some very, very simple things that might put us in a place where we're terrified of that blame, right? We have to understand that blame, we have to take it as a thing that we can learn from, a thing that we can grow from when it is legitimate. When it is not, we have to let it go and understand that it's not really all that important. And that's where the the ignorance versus wisdom comes in, right? So we've got greed, we've got aversion, and we've got ignorance. Ignorance is not knowing the difference between those two, right? Wisdom is knowing the difference between those two and knowing where legitimate blame is and where illegitimate blame is, and being able to kind of observe and contemplate and reflect on which of those things any specific blame or any specific praise is, right? Fame and disgrace. Oh boy. This one I have a slightly more complicated understanding of, mostly because I don't want fame. I don't like fame. And I think most of us, I realize that there's a psychological place that's coming from. I realize that there is a specific point that I have to look at within myself. And this is where it's useful to take a look at both sides of it, right? To take a look at the stuff that we are supposed to want, which, okay, most people do want a little bit of fame, right? They want people to be paying attention to them. They want people to see them. That's good. Getting attached to that, not good, right? And sometimes, especially for those of us who don't particularly want fame in the first place, we have to understand that a little bit of attention given to us is not necessarily always a bad thing. It doesn't always signal impending doom. It doesn't always signal some kind of trigger for some terrible thing. Yes, it could, but it doesn't have to, and especially in very small doses, right? Being renowned, which is a kind of fame, right? Being renowned for the things that you do to help others is not a bad thing at all. As long as it's done in measured doses, as long as it's done in a measured, principled, practiced way, right? As long as we are going about it and understanding it, being aware of what it does, and not grasping at it, right? Same thing with disgrace. Who likes their stuff to be run through the mud? Nobody. Well, okay, maybe there's a few people out there that this doesn't apply to, but for the majority of people, for most people, being disgraced, being embarrassed, being shamed is a pretty terrible thing. We don't like that. So we have to look at it and we have to shift the paradigm around, right? Here's your shame, here's your embarrassment, here's your disgrace, right? It can be that terrible thing in the background, preventing you from doing what you want because you're terrified of it. Or you can look at it and say, okay, this thing that we are doing, this thing that we are experiencing, this embarrassment that we're feeling, how do we use that to become better people? And when we can do that, then things shift dramatically. And I think that's that one. The last one, gain and loss. All right, who doesn't want to gain more? Well, I mean, other than the Buddha, right? And probably monks and nuns who are following the teachings of the Buddha. Who in normal, average day-to-day life doesn't want to gain? Who goes to work with the mindset, I don't want to make any money? Few people, very few, right? That's gain. And in the right ways, practiced in the right ways, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Wanting a little bit to make sure that the needs are, wanting to make sure that needs are being met is not necessarily a bad thing. It's grasping at that gain and trying to get more and more and more because you're insecure and you're terrified of not having enough and not looking like, not being as good as the next guy and not being good as, this other CEO and not being as good as all of these other people, right? That's where we have to sit there and be aware of it, right? A little bit of gain here and there, and especially spiritual gain is good. Material gain, not so much. But spiritual gain is definitely good. That we can support, right? That we can say, this is a good thing. I'd like to try to gain a little bit more wisdom, right? I would like to try to gain a little bit more compassion, right? A little bit more empathy, a little bit more kindness. I would like to gain the ability to practice these things. But again, it's what you do with it. Especially seeking, when we're talking about gain here, gain of status, gain of rank, gain of, extra money, gain of, getting your program, passed through all of the wickets so that you're getting, your program is getting all of, not necessarily a great thing, right? There are times where that can be relatively worthwhile, but most of the time just not so much. And especially if that gain takes over and you are attached to gain and attached to getting more, not because you have to, but because you have this internal insecurity driving you to do that. That second piece, not good. Gain just to say, okay, I'm getting as much as I need to survive. I'm getting as much as I need to be basically comfortable so that I can practice the Dharma and help others to do the same. No problem with that. Gain so that I can be better than everybody else. Absolute problem with that. Right? The first one, like getting enough so that I can comfortably practice myself and help others to do the same, good. Getting enough so that I can look better than everybody else, not good. Right? And that's what we're trying to not be attached to, is that thing. Same thing with loss, right? And this one, I mean, you can really just kind of flip exactly what I talked about for loss. Getting loss materially and being terrified of losing materially, or losing in competition, or losing in business, or losing that loss, being worried about that loss, that's your big, nebulous doom thing, right? Nobody wants that. Well, few people want that. Being terrified of losing things is an aversion in and of itself, and it's not good, right? However, we can take a look at loss and say, what does this teach us? And there's one lesson to be learned from loss, and that is that all compounded things, and we've talked about this before, all compounded things are impermanent. They do not have, they're shifting like a sandcastle at the beach. It's gonna go under the waves. It's shifting, it's not permanent, it will fall apart. When we understand that, when we use loss to understand impermanence, we're 100% on board with what the Buddha is trying to teach us. And that's a good thing, right? And so I'm going to kind of wrap this up a little bit because I know that I'm really, like, I went pretty deep into this. What Pema Chodron what Venerable Pema Chodron is getting at is we don't have to be stuck in the fear. We don't have to be stuck with the nebulous stuff back here that we don't want, right? And we don't have to be stuck grasping at the things that we do want. We can look at them and say, what is this doing? How is this helping or not? And if it's not helping, what do we need to do to let it go? To not let it impact us, to not let it kind of take over our lives from the background. That shift matters. Changing how we view things matters. I think I'm going to leave it there. All right, let's go ahead and close out, and then we'll get you guys on to your normal day-to-day activities. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, dhammam saranam gacchami, sangham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata brahmani skaparam samadhyami, adinnadana brahmani skaparam samadhyami, kame Okay, thanks for watching Dharma Woods. We'll see you guys next time.